He slammed the bouquet onto the counter so hard the glass vase cracked. Not because he was angry, because he had just seen the boy's face. Damien Ravel, a man who had ordered buildings burned, rivals buried, and debts collected in ways that left no paperwork, stood completely still in a flower shop that smelled like rain and lilies, staring at a 7-year-old child who had just run through the back door holding a crayon drawing of a dog. And Damien's hands, the same hands that had never once trembled during any negotiation in his adult life, were shaking. The child looked up at him with dark eyes, Damien's eyes, blinked once, then turned and called toward the back of the shop. "Mom, there's a man out here. He broke your vase." If you were standing in Elena Voss's shoes at that moment, if the man who destroyed your 20s, who disappeared without a single word and left you crying in an empty apartment holding a positive pregnancy test, if that man walked into the small, quiet life you had spent a decade carefully rebuilding and then looked at your son the way someone looks at a mirror they weren't expecting, what would you do? What would any of us do? Before we go further, if you're watching this for the first time, hit that subscribe button right now and tap the like. Drop your city or country in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. Now stay with me, because what happens next inside that flower shop will change everything for all three of them. The rain had been coming down since morning. Elena Voss noticed it the way she noticed most things these days, practically, without sentiment. She pulled a sheet of brown craft paper across the work table and began wrapping the wedding bouquet she'd been commissioned to finish by noon. White peonies, eucalyptus, 2 stems of baby's breath that she'd trimmed twice because the first cut had been uneven. She was particular about uneven things. She'd spent 10 years making sure everything in her life was level, measured, and stable. The shop was called Paper and Petal. It sat on the corner of Voss Street. Not named after her, she always clarified, just a coincidence she'd stopped finding funny, and it had 12 steps from the front door to the work table, 4 feet of refrigerated display cases along the left wall, and a back room where Noah did his homework on a second-hand table she'd sanded smooth herself. The shop was small enough that she knew every corner of it without looking. She'd chosen it for exactly that reason. She heard the bell above the front door. She didn't look up immediately. The wedding client wasn't due for another 40 minutes, and her Tuesday regulars usually let themselves browse. She kept rapping, fingers moving from muscle memory, tucking the paper at the angle that held without tape. "I'm looking for black roses." The voice stopped her hands. Not because it was loud. It wasn't. It was quiet in the way that certain things are quiet, the way a room goes quiet right before something breaks. Low, measured, carrying the particular flatness of a man who had not needed to raise his voice in a very long time because people around him stopped talking the moment he began. She knew that voice. She had spent 4 years trying to forget it, and 6 more convincing herself she had succeeded. Elena set down the bouquet. She straightened her apron. She breathed in through her nose for 3 full counts, a trick her therapist had taught her in year 2, when the sleepless nights had gotten bad enough that she'd finally asked for help. And then she turned around. Damien Ravel had not changed the way she'd hoped he would. She had sometimes, in weak moments, imagined him diminished, tired, worn by whatever ugly life he'd chosen over her. Instead, he was taller than she remembered, or maybe just more present, the kind of man who occupied space differently than regular people. He wore a dark overcoat, no tie, collar open at the throat. He was looking at the refrigerated display case with his back partially toward her, studying the flower arrangements with the same focused attention she imagined he gave everything. Then he turned, and for exactly 2 seconds, neither of them moved. His expression shifted, barely, just a tightening around the jaw, a slight change in the set of his mouth, and she watched him process it. The shop. Her. The apron with the small ink stain on the left pocket she'd never managed to fully wash out. "Elena." Not a question. "We don't carry black roses." Her voice came out steadier than she deserved credit for. "Nobody in the city does. You'd have to order them." He looked at her for a moment longer. "Then I'll order them." "That takes 2 weeks minimum, and I don't do bulk for—" She stopped, started again. "For certain types of events." "What types?" "The kind your family typically hosts." The silence that followed was not comfortable. It was the specific silence of 2 people who know too much about each other, standing inside the neutral territory of a business transaction, both of them trying to decide whether to acknowledge what they actually were. She had a customer. She had a bouquet to finish. She had a son in the back room who would come running through that door any minute because it was 11:45. And Noah always got hungry at 11:45, without fail, every single day, and she had not thought this through. She had not prepared for this. She had spent 10 years assuming Damien Ravel would stay on his side of the city, and she would stay on hers, and the universe would have the basic decency to keep them separate. Elena. The back door burst open. Noah came in at full speed the way he always did, sneakers squeaking on the tile floor, holding a folded piece of paper in one hand and reaching for the mini-fridge behind the counter with the other. He was 7 years old, 4 feet and 3 inches tall, and he moved through the world like he'd already decided it belonged to him. "Mom, I finished my drawing. Can I have the apple juice?" Mrs. Caldwell said. He stopped, looked at the man by the display case, looked at the cracked vase on the counter where Damien's hand had apparently landed harder than intended, looked back at the man. "You broke her vase," Noah said. Damien did not answer immediately. He was looking at the child with an expression Elena had never seen on his face before. Not the flat control she remembered, not the guarded warmth he used to show her in private. Something entirely different, something undefended. Noah had Damien's eyes, dark, slightly narrow at the corners, the kind of eyes that noticed things and didn't announce what they'd noticed. He had Damien's jaw, still soft with childhood, but already carrying the shape of what it would become. And just above his left collarbone, barely visible above the collar of his shirt, was a small brown birthmark, irregular at the edges, shaped loosely like a splatter. Damien had one in the same place. She had noticed it on Noah when he was 4 days old, in the hospital, when she was still not sleeping and not eating and trying to understand how she was supposed to do any of this alone. She had cried about it then, not because it was a mark, but because it was proof of something she had wanted to stop thinking about. Damien's eyes moved from Noah's face to that spot on his collar, then to Elena. "I'll pay for the vase," Damien said. His voice had changed. Something in the lower register, like a wire pulled too tight. "That's fine. Noah, go back in the workroom." Her own voice was too calm. She could hear it. Noah did not go back in the workroom. He was 7, and he was curious, and he was examining Damien with the focused suspicion of a child who had decided this particular adult was interesting. "Why are you wearing a coat inside? It's not that cold." "Noah, I'm just asking." "Noah, please." He looked at her, registered something in her face he couldn't name, but that made him take one step back. Then he grabbed his apple juice from the mini-fridge, tucked his drawing under his arm, and walked back through the door. He left it slightly open. She knew he was listening. She looked at Damien. Damien looked at her. "How old is he?" Damien said. "I have a customer coming at noon. I need you to leave." "Elena, I need you to leave right now." He didn't move. Not because he was being aggressive. She'd seen Damien aggressive, and this wasn't that. I was still in the way. People go still when the ground has moved under them, and they're waiting to find out if it's going to move again. "How old is he?" he said again, the same flat tone, but something underneath it that wasn't flat at all. 7, she said. Because lying about math was a pointless cruelty, and she was tired, suddenly, all at once, in a way she hadn't been in years. Tired down to somewhere structural. "He's 7. The number landed on him visibly. She watched him do the arithmetic. She watched his face when he arrived at the answer. "You should have told me," he said. The nerve of that sentence, the absolute stunning nerve of it moved through her like cold water, and she gripped the edge of the work table. "Get out of my shop," she said, quietly, meaning every syllable. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the door through which Noah had disappeared. Then he straightened, reached into the inside pocket of his coat, and set a card on the counter next to the cracked vase. "I'll be in touch," he said. "Don't." He left. She stood at the work table for a full minute without moving. Then she walked to the back door, opened it, and found Noah sitting at his homework table with his apple juice, the drawing face up in front of him. It was a dog she saw now, a brown dog with enormous ears and a lopsided smile. "Mom," Noah said without looking up. "Who was that man?" She sat down across from him. Her knees needed somewhere to go. "Nobody important." Noah looked up then. He had her stubbornness, and she was increasingly unable to pretend otherwise, Damien's eyes. He did not look like he believed her. He had the same thing as me, he said, and touched the spot on his own collarbone. What do you mean? On his neck. The mark. The same shape. He paused. I saw it when he looked at the vase. Elena said nothing. Noah looked at her with those dark, careful eyes. Is he my dad? She should have had an answer for this. She had known, in the abstract, that this question would come someday. She'd rehearsed versions of it in the shower, in the car, lying awake at 2 in the morning with the sound of Noah's breathing through the baby monitor she'd kept running long after he'd outgrown it, just because the sound comforted her. She'd planned something measured and age-appropriate and honest without being destructive. Let's talk about it later, she said. Okay? Tonight, Noah studied her. He was a child who could smell evasion. She'd never quite figured out how she'd raise someone so much more perceptive than she'd intended. Okay, he said finally, in the tone of someone who was agreeing temporarily and reserving the right to return to the subject. He went back to his drawing. She went back to the bouquet. Her hands were not steady for the rest of the afternoon. Damien sat in the back of the car for 11 minutes without telling Marcus to drive anywhere. Marcus, who had been his driver, and the closest thing to a personal security detail he tolerated for 6 years, did not ask questions. He kept the engine running and looked at the middle distance and waited. The rain was heavier now, running in sheets across the window. Damien looked at his own hands. They had stopped shaking. He'd made them stop through the concentrated effort of will that he'd built into a reflex over years. He could not afford to be visibly shaken, ever, by anything. The kind of work he did required that the people around him believe he had no soft center. He had worked hard to make that convincing. He had, over time, begun to believe it himself. 7 years old. He closed his eyes. The boy's face was still there, the exact shade of his eyes, which his mother had always called wolf gray, and which Damien had always called dark, because he wasn't sentimental about his own appearance. The jaw. The way the kid held himself when he was deciding something. That particular stillness. Damien recognized it because he saw it every morning in the mirror. The mark. He pressed 2 fingers to the spot beneath his own collar. He'd had it since birth. His mother had called it his signature. When he was 13, one of his father's associates had told him it looked like a bullet wound already fading, which had delighted his father and made Damien quietly nauseated in a way he hadn't understood yet. He pulled out his phone, pulled up a contact, put the phone away without calling. What would he say? Where would he begin? He had walked into that shop because he needed black roses for the memorial, 5 years since his father's death, an annual ritual the family maintained for appearances, even though most of them were glad the old man was gone. And a florist 2 blocks from the Ravel building had told him Paper and Petal was the only shop in Bellarosa that could reliably source specialty varieties. He had not known who owned it. He had done no research. For once in his adult life, he had walked into a situation completely unprepared. The universe, or something like it, had apparently decided he needed to learn what that felt like. "Where to, Mr. Ravel?" Marcus said finally, with the quiet patience of a man who understood that his employer sometimes needed to think through things that he would not be sharing. "Home," Damien said. He looked out the window as they pulled away from the curb. He could see the flower shop in the side mirror, the small green awning above the door, the yellow light in the window that meant the back room was occupied. He watched it until the car turned the corner. He did not stop watching until it was fully gone. She told herself she wouldn't call her sister. She called her sister. Raina Voss picked up on the second ring, which meant she was at home, which was either very good or very bad, depending on what mood she was in. "What happened?" Raina said, skipping hello the way she always did because she and Elena had developed over 34 years of sisterhood, a kind of conversational shorthand that dispensed with preamble. "He came into the shop." Silence. "Raina, I heard you. I'm processing." A pause. Damien Ravel walked into Paper and Petal. "Yes. Today. This morning. At 11:45. And Noah was there. He came in right before. He saw them in the same room." Elena pressed her palm flat against the wall of the back room, the cool plaster steadying her. "He noticed the mark." "Oh, Elena." "He asked me if that man was his dad." Raina exhaled slowly. What did you say? I said we'd talk tonight. Okay, that's okay. That's manageable. Raina's voice shifted into the practical mode that had carried them through their mother's illness and Elena's pregnancy and 2 business loans and 1 very bad year that neither of them spoke about directly anymore. What did Damien do? When he saw Noah? Elena thought about it. The way the cracked vase had rung against the glass counter. The way Damien's hand had gone completely flat on the surface, like he needed something to press against. The look on his face when he'd done the arithmetic. He asked how old Noah was, Elena said, and then he told me I should have told him. The silence that followed was not Raina processing. It was Raina deciding whether to say what she was thinking. Say it, Elena said. He's not wrong, Raina said carefully. He disappeared, Raina. He disappeared and he didn't call and he didn't write. And I was 24 years old and 2 months pregnant and I had nothing. I had nothing from him, not one word. I know. So don't. I'm not. I'm saying he's not wrong that he didn't know, which is different from saying you were wrong. A pause. But Elena, he's going to want to know him. You understand that, right? Whatever Damien Ravel is now, whatever he became, he saw his son today. Elena looked through the cracked door at Noah, who was now lying on his stomach on the floor, having abandoned the table, drawing something new with the concentrated dedication he brought to all creative projects. His shoes were off. His socks didn't match. He had a smear of blue marker on his left wrist that she'd been trying to get him to wash off since morning. I know, she said quietly. So what are you going to do? She watched her son draw. She watched his face, which was open and focused and completely unguarded in the way that children's faces are when they don't know they're being observed. I don't know yet, she said. I honestly don't know. She hung up the phone. She stood in the doorway. Noah looked up and found her watching him and gave her the grin. The wide, uncomplicated grin that had nothing of Damien in it, that was entirely hers, or maybe entirely his own, and held up the drawing. It's a better dog, he said. The ears are bigger. The ears are much better, she agreed. She smiled back at him. She kept the rest of it behind her eyes where it belonged, and she smiled at her son, and she thought, whatever happens next, this part, this exact thing right here, nobody takes this from us. Outside, the rain kept coming down, and on the street corner 3 blocks away, a black car idled in the downpour, the driver waiting, the passenger in the back seat holding a business card that had come back in his coat pocket because he had never quite made himself leave it there on the counter. Damien turned the card over in his hands. Elena Voss, paper and petal, a phone number, a small line drawing of a flower in the bottom left corner that she had probably designed herself. He thought about a boy with wolf-gray eyes and mismatched stubbornness and a birthmark in the shape of a splatter, asking his mother a question she hadn't been ready to answer. He thought about 7 years of not knowing. He thought about what came next. Marcus, he said. Sir. Pull up everything we have on Elena Voss, full background, property records, financials, associates, everything. Timeline? Tonight, Damien said. I want it tonight. The car pulled away from the curb. The rain erased its tracks behind it. And inside the small flower shop on the corner of Voss Street, a woman wrapped a wedding bouquet with hands that would not quite stop trembling, while her son drew dogs on the floor with bigger and bigger ears, completely unaware that the world outside his window had just shifted on its axis in a way that none of them, not one of the 3 of them, would be able to walk back from. The file Marcus delivered was 43 pages long. Damien didn't read it the way he read financial reports, skimming for headline numbers and exception items. He read it the way he read threat assessments, front to back, nothing skipped, every footnote examined. He sat at the table in the study of his penthouse apartment with a glass of water he didn't drink and read about Elena Voss for 2 hours and 40 minutes, while the rain continued outside and the city moved below him like something he no longer felt connected to. The file was thorough. Marcus was always thorough. Property records. She'd rented the shop space for 6 years, bought it outright 4 years ago with a combination of a small business loan and a lump sum down payment. She'd saved over 24 months of working double shifts at a wholesale florist warehouse on the east side of Bellarosa while simultaneously keeping a child alive on her own. Financial records. The business was modestly profitable, not dramatically so. She kept her overhead low, paid her single part-time employee. a retired woman named June Aldress, 62, who came in 3 mornings a week, in cash and on time. Medical records were not in the file because Marcus had limits, but hospital billing records, which were technically accessible through the right channels, showed one admission: Noah Voss, age 4, respiratory infection, 4-night inpatient stay. Pediatric ward, Bellarosa General. Damien stopped at that page. He thought about a 4-year-old alone with his mother in a hospital room. He thought about Elena in a plastic chair next to a small bed, doing the things she apparently did with everything, managing it, surviving it, not asking anyone for help. He turned the page. There was a section Marcus had flagged with a single paperclip, which was his system for items requiring attention. It was a record of anonymous transfers into Elena's business account. 8 of them, spread across 6 years, ranging from $2,000 to $12,000. Irregular intervals, untraceable origin, or rather, the trail was designed to be untraceable, routed through 3 shell accounts before reaching her, but Marcus had pulled it apart anyway because Marcus was excellent at his job. At the bottom of the flagged page, in Marcus's small, precise handwriting, origin confirmed. These come from us, sir. From the Ravel Holdings Subsidiary Fund, account ending 4471. Authorization signature on file is LR. Damien set the page down. He picked it back up. LR Lucian Ravel. His younger brother had been sending money to Elena Voss for 6 years. His younger brother, who as far as Damien had known, had no connection to Elena and had never been told about her. His younger brother, who had been managing the organization's secondary financial operations for the past 3 years under Damien's oversight, and who had never once mentioned her name. Damien sat with that for a long time. Outside, the rain changed character, lighter now, the heavy pour giving way to something steadier and more patient. He closed the file. He opened it again. He looked at the authorization signature. LR. There were 2 explanations. Either Lucian had independently discovered Elena's existence and decided, for reasons Damien could not yet construct, to send her money in secret. Or Lucian had known about Elena for significantly longer than Damien had realized, had known about Noah, and had been operating with that information in ways that Damien had not sanctioned and could not yet map. Neither explanation was comfortable. He picked up his phone. He put it back down. It was 2 in the morning, and calling Lucian at 2 in the morning with a question like this, with his current level of certainty, which was incomplete, was exactly the kind of move he'd spent 15 years learning not to make. You did not show your hand before you knew what the other player was holding. He went to bed. He did not sleep. At 5:15, he got up, made coffee, and stood at the window watching Bellarosa come back to life in the gray early light. And he thought about a 7-year-old boy who noticed things and didn't announce what he'd noticed. And he thought, that child has been in the same city as me for 7 years. 7 years. Elena decided to tell Noah the truth in the way she decided most hard things, abruptly, without enough preparation, because waiting for the right moment was a trap she'd fallen into too many times. She told him Tuesday night after dinner. Noah was washing his hands at the kitchen sink, humming something tuneless, and she sat down at the table and said, "Sit down for a second. I want to talk to you about something." He sat. He looked at her with those careful eyes. She told him that his father was a man she had loved a long time ago, before Noah was born, and that they had not been together when she found out she was pregnant, and that she had not been able to reach his father, and so she had raised Noah on her own. She told him his father's name was Damien. She did not tell him the last name yet. She told him the man in the shop was his father, and that she had not known he was going to come in, and that she was sorry Noah had found out that way. Noah listened. He had a habit, when processing information, of going very still and looking at a fixed point slightly to the left of the person speaking to him, as if the information was something spatial he needed to locate. When she finished, he said, "Why didn't you find him?" She had prepared for this question and found that preparation meant nothing when it was actually in front of her. "It was complicated," she said, "and I needed to keep you safe." Safe from what? From things that were part of his life that weren't safe for kids. Noah's jaw did a thing she recognized. It tightened, then released, which meant he was choosing not to argue yet. "Is he bad?" he said. She looked at her son. "He's complicated," she said finally. "Like most people." Noah thought about this. "Does he know about me now?" "Yes, because of yesterday." "Yes. Another silence. Is he going to come back? Elena breathed in through her nose. 3 counts. Probably. Noah looked at the place slightly to the left of her and was quiet for a long time. Then he looked directly at her. You could have told me, he said. I'm not a baby. It landed exactly where he intended it to. She didn't flinch, because he deserved her not flinching. You're right, she said. I'm sorry. He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he got up, pushed his chair in neatly. He was particular about chairs being pushed in. She had no idea where that had come from, and went to his room without saying anything else. She sat at the kitchen table alone with the quiet and thought, this is what the consequences of 10 years of decisions actually feel like. She sat there for a long time. Damien showed up at the shop on Thursday morning, 7 minutes before opening. Elena saw him through the glass when she was unlocking the front door. He was standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his coat pockets and no umbrella, though the morning was drizzling steadily, and he had the look of someone who had been there for a while and intended to stay. She opened the door. She did not step back to let him in. I told you not to come back, she said. I know. He didn't apologize. He also didn't move. I need 10 minutes. I have orders to prep before 9. Elena. The way he said her name had not changed. That was the thing she had not prepared for. Not his face, not his height, not even the way he moved. The way he said her name, like it meant something specific, like it was still a word with weight. She had built a lot of psychological infrastructure over 10 years, and she needed all of it right now. She stepped back. He came inside. She left the door open. She went to the work table and picked up a bundle of stems she'd been meaning to trim since yesterday, because she needed something in her hands. He stood on the customer side of the counter and looked at the shop the way he'd looked at the file, carefully, missing nothing. You bought this building, he said, 4 years ago. With the loan from Hartwell Lending. Her hand stopped on the stems. She looked up. You pulled my financial records. Yes. The steadiness of his admission, no apology, no justification, just confirmation, made something cold move through her. That's a violation. I know what it is. I needed to understand the situation. The situation, she repeated. My life is not a situation you need to understand. He's my son. He is my son. The stems were in her fist now. I have raised that child every single day for 7 years without one word from you, without $1 from you, without any 12 payments, Damien said. She stopped. 8 transfers to be precise. Into your business account between 6 years ago and 3 months ago, totaling $44,000. His voice was flat, but something underneath it wasn't. Did you know where those came from? She stared at him. Her grip on the stems loosened. Those were anonymous business grants, she said, for women-owned small businesses. I applied through a municipal program. There was no municipal program, Damien said. Someone was sending you money and disguising the source. I only found this out 2 nights ago. A pause. The authorization on the transfers belongs to my brother. The shop was very quiet. The drizzle on the front window made a sound like static. Lucian, she said. The name felt strange in her mouth. She had met Lucian Ravel exactly twice, both times in Damien's company, 10 years ago, before the world rearranged itself. She remembered a younger man, 2 years behind Damien, narrower in the face, with quick, assessing eyes that she'd found vaguely uncomfortable. Why would Lucian? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He looked at her steadily. Did you ever have contact with him after I left? No. The word was immediate and absolute. Damien, I had no contact with anyone from your family. After you disappeared, I tried once. I called the number I had for your father's office, and a man told me you were unavailable and that I should stop calling. She set the stems down. That was the last time. Something shifted in his expression. Who answered? I don't know. I didn't recognize the voice. He was quiet for a moment. When was this? Maybe 3 weeks after you stopped being reachable. I didn't know I was pregnant yet. I just wanted to know what had happened to you. She kept her voice level through the sheer force of practice. And then a few weeks after that, I found out about Noah, and I spent a long time deciding whether to try again, and I decided that whatever world you had gone into was one I couldn't bring a child near, so I didn't. He looked at her for a long time. I didn't choose to disappear, he said. She picked the stems back up. Don't. Elena, don't. I have heard that explanation from you in my head approximately 1,000 times over 10 years, in every possible version. I used to need it to be true. I don't need that anymore. She started trimming. I need you to tell me what you want. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I want to meet him, properly. Not the way it happened. I want to meet my son. The scissors made a clean sound against the stems. She set them down and looked at him directly. If I say yes to that, I need you to understand something. If anything from your life, anything, follows you anywhere near Noah, that's the end. No negotiation. I will take him somewhere you will never find us, and I will do it without hesitation. I know. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you the conditions. I know what you're telling me. He met her eyes. And I'm telling you I understand them. She studied his face. The 10 years had not softened him, but they had changed him somewhere internal. There was something in the way he held himself now that was different from the young man she'd known. Something heavier, like someone carrying weight they'd stopped expecting to be able to put down. Saturday morning, she said. 10 o'clock. He has a drawing class until 9:30, and then he comes back here and helps me open up the shop. You can come by at 10. You'll have an hour. Something moved across his face that she didn't have a word for. Thank you, he said, which was 2 words she had not expected. He left. She stood at the work table and breathed for a moment, letting the air out slowly, and then she picked up her scissors and went back to work because work was the thing she knew how to do, and she needed something she knew right now. Lucien Revel was in a meeting when Damien walked in. The meeting was with 3 men from the docks operation, and all 3 of them looked up when Damien opened the door, and all 3 of them read something in the way Damien was standing that made them independently decide they had somewhere else to be. They were out of the room in 40 seconds. Lucien watched them go with the controlled patience of a man who had learned patience as a professional discipline rather than a natural one. Brother, Lucien said, leaning back in his chair. He was 33, 2 years younger than Damien, with the same dark coloring but a different arrangement, lighter through the jaw, sharper at the eyes. He had a quality of watchfulness that people often mistook for intelligence, and he was intelligent, which made the mistake convenient. I didn't know you were coming by. Account ending 4471, Damien said. He pulled up a chair and sat down, which was deliberate. Sitting meant a conversation, standing meant a confrontation, and he wanted Lucien to read this as a conversation for as long as possible. Walk me through the last 6 years of outgoing transfers. Lucien's expression didn't change. It was a good face for this kind of moment. Open, mildly curious, giving nothing. That's the discretionary fund. I've used it for a dozen different purposes, Damien. You'd need to be more specific. 8 transfers, irregular intervals, 44,000 total. Recipient account belongs to a woman named Elena Voss. He paused. Walk me through those specifically. The pause before Lucien answered was exactly 1 beat too long. A person who didn't know Lucien wouldn't have noticed it. Damien had been reading Lucien's pauses since Lucien was 12 years old. She was a contact, Lucien said. An old contact of yours, if I remember correctly. After you broke off the relationship, I monitored the situation for a while as a precaution. Loose ends. A precaution, Damien said. She knew things about the family. I thought it was prudent to keep her comfortable. A comfortable person doesn't go to the authorities. She had no information that would have been actionable. You know that. Damien kept his voice even. Try again. Another pause. Shorter this time because Lucien had recalibrated. He understood now that the story wasn't working and he was switching to a different approach. She had a child, Lucien said. I found out about the boy approximately 6 years ago. I thought it was relevant to keep tabs on the situation. Why didn't you tell me? Because you had moved on, Damien. You weren't asking about her. I made a judgment call. A judgment call, Damien repeated. He looked at his brother for a long moment. That's an interesting phrase. When you say you kept tabs on the situation, what does that mean exactly? Surveillance, periodic, nothing invasive. So you've been watching a woman and a child for 6 years, sending them money to keep them comfortable, and none of this appeared in any report you gave me. I didn't think it was relevant to operational concerns. The fact that I have a son, Damien said, was not relevant. The room went quiet in a particular way. Lucien looked at him. Something behind his eyes shifted. an adjustment, a recalculation, the almost visible process of a man deciding which version of a story to commit to. I wasn't certain the child was yours, he said. You were certain enough to send $44,000. Damien, don't. He stood up, which now meant what it had originally meant. I'm going to ask you one direct question, and I need a direct answer. Did you have any involvement in why I stopped being able to reach Elena 10 years ago? Any interference? Anything I should know about? Lucian held his gaze. His expression was arranged into something that looked like a mild offense at the insinuation. That's a hell of a thing to ask your brother. Yes, Damien said. It is. Answer it. No, Lucian said. I had no involvement in how things ended between you and Elena Voss 10 years ago. You were pulled into the organization, you had to make choices about your priorities, and the relationship ended. That's what happened. He spread his hands, a gesture of openness he'd practiced into naturalness. I understand why you're upset. Finding out about the boy this way, that wasn't how it should have happened. But I made the calls I made with the information I had, and I stand by them. Damien looked at him for a moment longer. Then he picked up his coat from the chair back. We'll talk again, he said. He walked out. Behind him, he heard Lucian exhale once, quietly, controlled, and then the sound of a phone being picked up. In the elevator, Damien pulled out his own phone. He sent Marcus a single message. Full audit on Lucian's communications for the past 10 years. Personal accounts, operational lines, everything. I want whatever there is. He pocketed the phone. The elevator dropped toward the lobby. He had walked into that room wanting to be wrong. He was not wrong. Well, Saturday arrived the way bad days often do. Clear sky, clean light, the kind of morning that has no business being attached to what's about to happen. Elena had not told Noah that Damien was coming. She'd started to, twice, and both times had stopped because she didn't know how to attach the information to something stable. She told him Saturday morning, 20 minutes before Damien was due, while Noah was eating cereal at the kitchen table and still carrying the slightly glazed expression of someone who had not yet fully rejoined the waking world. Your father is coming by at 10, she said, to say hello. You don't have to talk to him if you don't want to. Noah looked up. He was sharper than the glazed expression suggested. She had learned this over 7 years of similar mornings. Okay, he said. Okay as in you're fine with it, or okay as in you heard me. Okay as in I heard you. He ate another spoonful. Is he going to bring anything? I don't know. I didn't tell him to. My friend Marcus's dad always brings something when he's trying to make up for stuff. He said it without particular emotion, the kind of observation that is more devastating for being casual. Elena sat down across from him. He's not trying to make up for anything yet. This is just a first step. Noah looked at her. Do you want me to be nice to him? She thought about it. She thought about what it would mean to ask her 7-year-old son to manage her complicated feelings about a man he'd never properly met. And she thought about what it would mean to set him up to feel obligated. I want you to be yourself, she said finally, whatever that means today. Noah seemed to find this acceptable. He finished his cereal. He went and brushed his teeth. He came back to the front room of the shop in the jeans with the hole in the left knee that she kept meaning to patch, and a shirt with a cartoon fish on it, and sat on the stool behind the counter where he sometimes helped her with small tasks, and he waited. Damien was 4 minutes early. He came through the door with a careful expression, the kind of controlled neutrality that Elena recognized as the maximum effort he was putting in, and he was carrying, somewhat awkwardly, a paper bag from the bakery 2 blocks down. His eyes went to Noah immediately. Then he looked at Elena, then back at Noah. Noah looked at him the way he looked at most new things, directly, without performance. Hi, Noah said. Hi, Damien said. The word came out differently than any word Elena had heard from him in the past week. Quieter. The edges worn off. He set the bag on the counter. I didn't know what you liked, so I got a few things. There's a croissant and a thing with jam in it and some kind of chocolate roll. Noah looked at the bag. I like the jam one, he said. What's your name? Damien looked like the question hit him somewhere he wasn't guarded. Damien, he said. My mom said your last name is Ravel. That's right. Noah picked up the bag, looked inside, extracted the jam pastry with the focused care of someone making an important selection. She said you're complicated, he said, not looking up. Elena pressed her knuckles briefly to her mouth. She's right, Damien said. I am. Noah looked up then. I was chewing the edge of the pastry and examining Damien with those careful, taking things in eyes, and Damien held the examination without looking away, without performing ease he didn't feel, and Elena stood to the side and watched a man who was afraid of very little. In the world, try not to be afraid of a 7-year-old's honest assessment of him. Okay, Noah said finally, in the same tone he used when he'd decided something. Do you want the croissant? I don't really like plain ones. Damien sat down on the stool across the counter, the one Elena's customers used. He took the croissant. His hands, she noticed, were not steady. They sat there, the three of them, in the small flower shop that smelled of greenery and rain from the open window, while the city moved outside and a father and son ate bakery items and said almost nothing, and Elena watched them both and felt something she didn't have a name for yet, something that was not forgiveness and not hope exactly, but was somehow made of the same material as both. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it. Unknown number. She would have ignored it, except it buzzed again immediately, and a third time, and she picked it up to silence it. The text read, "You need to stop this meeting right now. Ravel is being watched. His enemies know about the boy. Get the child out of that shop." It was unsigned. The number was not one she recognized. She read it twice. Then she looked up at Damien. I was watching her face. He saw her expression and was on his feet before she said a word. "What?" he said. She turned the phone toward him. He read it. Something happened in his face that she had never seen there before. Not fear. Damien didn't produce fear the same way other people did, but something adjacent to it. Something that looked like the moment before a decision that cannot be unmade. He pulled out his own phone. I was already dialing when Noah, who had been watching both of them with his bakery pastry halfway to his mouth, said quietly, "Is something wrong?" Elena came around this counter and put both hands on her son's shoulders. She looked at Damien. Damien looked back at her with that new expression still on his face, and she watched him understand, fully, in that moment, with the weight of everything it meant, that this was no longer a situation contained to the two of them. That whatever world he lived in had just extended itself toward her son, and that the wall she had spent 7 years building had just developed a crack she could not see the other side of. "Yes," he said to Noah, because unlike Elena, he apparently could not manage a convincing lie to the child. "But I'm going to fix it." He looked at Elena. "I need you to go out the back, right now. Take him and go out the back." "Damien, there's a car on the side street, blue. Marcus is driving. Go." He held her eyes. "Please." She looked at her son. She looked at the man who had walked into her shop 4 days ago and cracked a vase and turned her 7 years of careful equilibrium into something unrecognizable. She thought about the anonymous text and the $44,000 and Lucien Ravel's name on an authorization she hadn't known existed, and she understood, with the clarity of someone who had spent a long time looking away from something they couldn't afford to see, that the wall was not just cracked, it was already down. She took Noah's hand. He came without argument. He was 7, but he was reading the room. She had raised a child who read rooms. And she moved toward the back of the shop. And she did not look back at Damien, because looking back was the thing she could not afford right now. And she pushed through the back door into the alley where the drizzle had started again, and the blue car was already there, exactly where he'd said it would be. And that fact, that he had already placed it there before he even came inside, before he even saw Noah for the second time, that fact told her something about the 10 years she thought she knew that she was not yet ready to fully understand. Noah got in the car. Elena got in the car. Marcus pulled away from the curb without a word. Behind them, through the rear window, Elena could see the back door of the shop still swinging on its hinges. And beyond it, somewhere inside, Damien Ravel was making a phone call to people she didn't know about a threat she hadn't seen coming, and for the first time in 7 years, Elena Voss understood that she was not, and had never been, standing outside the storm. She had been in it the entire time. The blue car had been moving for 6 minutes when Elena's phone rang. Unknown number again. Different from the text. She looked at it, looked at Marcus's eyes in the rearview mirror, looked at Noah sitting beside her with his seatbelt on and his bakery bag still in his lap, and answered it. "Don't go to any location Damien suggested," the voice said, male, controlled, the flat effect of someone reading from a prepared statement. The safe house on Mercer Street is compromised. Marcus Held is not who Damien believes he is. Get out of that car. The line went dead. Elena looked at the back of Marcus's head, the close-cropped gray hair, the broad shoulders, the hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. He had driven her and Noah from the shop with complete efficiency. He had not asked where they were going. He had simply pulled away from the curb when she got in and had been heading, she realized now, looking out the window at the passing street signs, northwest, toward Mercer. "Marcus," she said. "Almost there, Ms. Voss. Where are we going?" "Mr. Ravel's secondary location." He called ahead. She looked at Noah. He was looking out the window. She put her hand on his knee, one squeeze, and he glanced at her and she gave him the look. The specific look she used for situations where she needed him to follow her lead without explanation, which she had developed for use in doctors' offices and difficult social situations and had never imagined needing in a moving vehicle. He gave her the small nod. He was 7. He trusted her completely. That trust was the most terrifying thing she was carrying right now. "I need you to pull over," she said to Marcus. "Ms. Voss, Mr. Ravel specifically, I need you to pull over right now or I'm going to open this door while you're moving, and that is going to be a problem for everyone." The car slowed. She did not wait for a full stop. She had the door open and Noah out before Marcus could do more than say her name, and then she was on the sidewalk of an unfamiliar block with her son's hand in hers, and the car idling at the curb behind them, and she walked, not ran, running attracted attention, into the first open door she could find, which was a dry cleaner, and the woman behind the counter looked up and Elena said, "Is there a back exit?" There was. They went through it. She called Damien from the alley behind the dry cleaner. He picked up on the first ring. "Where are you?" he said immediately, and his voice had a quality she had not heard before. Stripped of the measured control, something raw underneath, like the specific frequency of fear that people produce when they are trying not to produce fear. "I'm not telling you until you tell me something first," she said. "Marcus, how long has he worked for you?" Silence. "Damien." 6 years, he said. "Why?" "Someone called me in the car, told me not to go to the Mercer location, told me Marcus isn't who you think he is." The silence this time was different. She could hear him breathing. "Get somewhere public," he said, "somewhere with people. Don't call me again from that number. They may have it. Buy a cheap phone. Text me the number. I'll find you." "This is insane," she said. "This is completely clus. I know it is, Elena." He stopped. "Is Noah okay?" She looked at her son, who was standing beside her in the alley with his bakery bag and his cartoon fish shirt and his careful, reading-the-room expression. "He's fine," she said. "For now. Keep him that way. I'm going to fix this." "You keep saying that." "I know." A beat. "I mean it this time." She hung up. She looked at Noah. He looked back at her. "Are we hiding?" he said. "Temporarily," she said. "Okay," he said, with the same tone he'd used when she'd told him they were moving shops 3 years ago. The same tone he used for most large disruptions. A kind of provisional acceptance that left room for protest later. "There's still a chocolate roll in the bag if you want some." She almost laughed. She did not laugh. She took his hand and they walked out of the alley toward the main street 2 blocks east, and she thought about a woman she knew who ran a small printing business 4 blocks from here, who owed her a favor from a complicated situation involving a rehearsal dinner bouquet, and she thought, you go to the people you trust, and you figure out the rest after. Damien was already inside the Mercer location when he got Elena's call. He'd arrived 90 seconds ahead of Marcus's car. He'd taken a different route, habit. He never arrived at a secondary location the same way he sent other people. And what he found when he got there told him everything he needed to know before Elena said a word. The door had been opened, not forced opened, which meant someone with a key, or someone who knew the combination, or someone who had been given access by a person with both. Inside, 2 of the 3 men he'd placed there the previous day were zip-tied to chairs in the back room. The third was gone. The room had been searched efficiently, thoroughly, the kind of search that comes from knowing exactly what you're looking for rather than guessing. On the table in the center of the room, placed deliberately where it would be seen immediately upon entry, was a photograph. He picked it up. It was printed on plain paper, the kind of thing you could produce from any office printer in 20 minutes. The image was clear enough. Noah, in what looked like the yard behind the school building, in conversation with a man Damien did not recognize. The photograph had a timestamp in the lower right corner. 2 days ago. Wednesday. Under the photograph was a single line of text, also printed. "We've known about him longer than you have." Damien set the photograph down. He made himself stand still for a moment, because the alternative was to put his fist through the wall, which would not accomplish anything and would make his hand useless for the rest of the day. "We've known about him longer than you have." He called Elena. He heard what she said about Marcus. He told her to get somewhere public and buy a phone and hung up, and then stood in the compromised safe house with 2 of his men zip-tied to chairs and looked at a photograph of his son standing next to a stranger and understood that the situation had moved significantly past what he'd been tracking. He cut the zip ties on his 2 men. He asked them what had happened. They told him 4 people, professional, had come through 40 minutes before Damien arrived. They had known the location, the staffing, the entry code. They had not been violent beyond what was necessary to secure the room. They had taken the 3rd man, Petrov, 7 years on Damien's payroll, and left the photograph. Petrov, 7 years. Marcus, 6 years. Damien thought about the people he had trusted for the longest and felt something very cold settle into the center of his chest. He called the number for his operational security head and got no answer. He called 2 other people and got no answer from either. He stood in the empty room and looked at the photograph of Noah standing in a schoolyard and thought about how long it takes to place someone inside a 7-year-old's daily routine without the mother noticing. He thought about the text Elena had received in the shop, the one warning her to leave, which he had assumed was a friend, an ally, a leak from within his own organization running in his direction for once. He now considered the alternative, that the text had not been sent to protect Noah, but to move Elena out of the shop and into Marcus's car, to separate the child from the only adult whose instincts he would not have been able to predict, which meant someone had planned for Elena's reaction, had banked on her trusting the warning because it came from an unknown source, had understood her well enough to use her own caution as a tool. He picked up the photograph again. He looked at the man standing next to Noah. He committed the face to memory with the thoroughness of someone who understood that forgetting a face in this kind of situation was a luxury he could not afford. Then he called a number he had not called in 4 years, a man named Oren Vask, who operated outside the formal structure of the Ravel organization and whose particular skill set had always made Damien uncomfortable enough to keep him at arm's length. He was past arm's length now. He was in a place where comfort was no longer a relevant variable. "I need everything you can find on a man named Marcus Held," Damien said when Oren answered. 6 years of background. Who he was before I hired him, who he talked to. And I need it in 2 hours. "That's a short window," Oren said. "I know, double your rate. Triple." "Fine." He hung up. He looked at the 2 men standing in the room with him, rubbing their wrists where the zip ties had been. "Get the car," he said. "We're going to find my brother." Lucian was not at the office. He was not at any of the 3 locations Damien tried over the next 40 minutes, which itself was information. Lucian did not disappear without reason, and the reasons he disappeared were never coincidental. Damien drove between locations with a controlled efficiency that his driver, a young man named Breck, who had worked for him for 8 months and was therefore not currently on his list of people to be suspicious of, correctly interpreted as the kind of focus that did not benefit from conversation. Oren called back in 90 minutes, not 2 hours. "Marcus Held doesn't exist before 2018, Oren said. "I mean that literally. There is no paper trail for him prior to the date he applied for the position with your organization. The background check you ran on him was clean because the background check was manufactured. Somebody built him a history going back 8 years that holds up to standard screening but falls apart under the kind of pressure I just applied." A pause. "He was placed, Damien. Somebody put him inside your operation specifically." "By who?" "That's the part I'm still pulling on. But there's a name on the documents that built his identity. Not prominent, not something you'd see on a first pass. A notary signature on one of the residency records. The notary's license belongs to a firm called Castellan Administrative Services." Another pause, this one deliberate. "Castellan is a subsidiary. It routes back through 2 holding companies to Ravel Holdings." The car moved through traffic. Damien watched the city outside the window. "Which division?" he said. "Secondary Financial Operations," Oren said. "The division currently managed by, Lucian," Damien said. "Yes." He thanked Oren. He ended the call. He looked at the city going past outside the window and thought about a conversation he'd had 6 years ago when he'd promoted Lucian to run the secondary financial arm, and Lucian had said, "I'll need latitude to build the right team, Damien. I need you to trust my judgment on personnel." And Damien, who had trusted his brother with the automatic faith of someone who had grown up in the same house and fought through the same difficult years and assumed that survival created loyalty, Damien had said yes. He had given Lucian the keys to a door he didn't fully understand and trusted that the person holding them would use them correctly. He thought about the $44,000 sent to Elena over 6 years. He thought about Lucian saying, "I was not certain the child was yours," which was a lie. A man who was not certain did not authorize $44,000 of quiet payments, did not build surveillance infrastructure, did not place a manufactured person in the driver's seat of his brother's trusted staff. He thought about 10 years ago, about the specific, precise moment when his father's men had come to him and told him Elena had sent word that she wanted no further contact, that she had made her decision, that she was moving on. He had believed it because he had been 25 and he had just lost 2 people close to him in the span of a month, and the organization was in crisis, and the idea that Elena had chosen to walk away was devastating but comprehensible, more comprehensible, in the specific fog of that period than the alternative, that someone had manufactured the message, that it had not come from her at all. He thought about Elena in the shop saying, "I called once. A man told me you were unavailable and that I should stop calling. I didn't recognize the voice." He thought about Lucian at 21, lean and quick-eyed and already very good at being underestimated. He thought, how long? How long had Lucian been building towards something? How long had Damien been the obstacle in the architecture? "Pull over," he said to Breck. Breck pulled over. Damien got out and stood on the sidewalk for a moment in the afternoon air, which was cool and smelled like rain and exhaust, and he pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes and let himself have exactly 30 seconds of the full weight of what he was understanding. 30 seconds. He had learned this from his father, which was one of the few useful things his father had taught him. Allow yourself the feeling, because suppressing it entirely makes you sloppy, but put a wall around it. 30 seconds, then function. He dropped his hands. He took a breath. He got back in the car. "Find Lucian," he said. Elena was in the back room of the printing shop when the second phone arrived. A cheap prepaid brought by a delivery person who knocked on the back door and handed it to her without a word. She turned it on. It already had one contact saved, D. She texted the number. Within 30 seconds, Damien called. "Are you safe?" he said. "For now. Noah's with me. He's fine. He's drawing on the back of some paper your friend left." She kept her voice low. "Damien, I need you to tell me what's happening, all of it, right now," he told her. Not everything. She could hear the compression in his voice, the decisions being made about what she needed to know versus what would frighten her beyond usefulness. But enough. Lucian. Marcus. The photograph of Noah in the schoolyard. The 10-year architecture that was becoming visible now only because it had served its purpose and its architect no longer needed it hidden. She listened without interrupting. She was sitting on a folding chair in a room that smelled like ink and paper, with her son 3 feet away doing something elaborate with a black marker, and she listened to a man explain how her life had been observed and managed and quietly controlled by someone she had met twice, and she felt the particular cold that comes not from fear, but from the retrospective recognition of how completely you were not in control of what you thought you were in control of. "The message 10 years ago," she said. "The one you got, saying I didn't want contact." Silence. "Did you send me one?" she said. "Did someone send a message in your name?" More silence. Then, "I think so. I don't know the exact mechanism yet. But yes, I think what happened between us 10 years ago was manufactured." She pressed her free hand flat against her knee. She breathed. She thought about 24 years old and a positive pregnancy test and a phone call that went unanswered and a decade of understanding herself as someone who had been left, who had been chosen against, who had built her life from the specific rubble of that choice. "He separated us," she said. Yes. So that you would inherit the organization without a reason to step back from it. Without you. His voice had that quality again, the stripped one. Elena, I need you to understand that I don't know yet how much danger you're in. I think Lucian has been watching Noah because Noah is leverage, the most reliable leverage he could find. As long as he has a way to threaten the child, he has a way to threaten me. I understand that. I'm going to find him, and I'm going to… Damien. She stopped him. There's something I need to tell you, and I need you to hear it before you do anything else. She looked at her son, who was drawing with great concentration and not looking up. Noah asked about you again last night, after you came to the shop. He asked me if you were going to disappear again like before. The silence went long enough that she thought the connection might have dropped. What did you tell him? Damien said. I told him I didn't know. She kept her voice flat and honest, because lying to him right now felt like one wound too many to sustain. I told him that was a question only you could answer. Elena, I'm not asking you to make promises. I'm telling you what your son asked, because he deserves to have that information exist somewhere between us. She heard him exhale. I'm going to get you out of this, he said. I'm going to get both of you out of this. After that, a pause. After that, I'd like to answer that question myself, if he'll let me. She didn't respond to that. She wasn't ready to respond to that. She said, be careful, because it was the true thing and the immediate thing. And she ended the call and sat in the printing shop with her son, and the smell of ink and the sound of a marker on paper. Noah looked up. Is it bad? He said. She looked at him, at his face, which was so much itself, so entirely and stubbornly Noah, and which carried in its angles and its watchfulness all the evidence of a history she had not been given the chance to share with the man who was the other half of it. It's complicated, she said. He nodded. He went back to drawing. A moment later he held it up, a man and a boy, stick figures, standing in front of a rectangle that might have been a shop or a building, both of them holding something that might have been flowers. She looked at it for a long time. It's not finished, Noah said. I'm going to add the mom. She nodded. She looked at the drawing and she did not cry, because crying was a thing she would do later, alone, when she had the privacy for it, and right now she needed to be the thing she had always been, the stable thing, the level thing, the one that held. Lucien was in the old Ravel warehouse on the south side of the port. Damien found him through a contact he had not used in 3 years, a woman named Sophia who managed one of the legal business fronts, and who had, it turned out, spent 6 years quietly documenting the irregularities in Lucian's operations because she had correctly assessed that documentation might someday be the only currency that mattered. She gave Damien the warehouse address and a flash drive and told him to be careful because she had heard from 2 separate sources that Lucian had brought in outside people over the past 72 hours, professionals who were not from Belarosa and who had not been hired through any channel Damien would have sanctioned. Damien took the flash drive and the address and thanked Sophia and drove to the port. He took 2 men with him. He would have liked more, but more meant more potential exposure, and he no longer knew who else in his organization had been compromised, so he kept it to 2 people he could be reasonably confident in and accepted the arithmetic as it was. The warehouse was large and mostly dark when they arrived, which was either because Lucian was not there or because Lucian wanted it to look that way. Damien went in through the east entrance, the one that was not the obvious approach, and he moved through the first section of the space with his 2 men flanking him in the particular focused attention of someone who has been trained since adolescence to treat all environments as potentially hostile. He found Lucian in the center office of the warehouse. He was sitting at a table with a laptop and a phone, and he looked up when Damien entered without apparent surprise. The 2 external men Sophia had mentioned were visible, one by the far wall, one near the door to the left. Both of them tracked Damien and his 2 men, and nobody moved. I wondered how long it would take you, Lucian said. Where's Petrov? Damien said. Petrov is fine. Petrov works for me, has for about 4 years. And Marcus? Marcus has worked for me since before he worked for you. Lucian closed the laptop. He was composed in the way of someone who has been waiting for a confrontation and has spent the waiting period deciding exactly how to conduct it. You're not going to hit me, are you? Because that would be a waste of whatever time we have for a real conversation. What did you do to Elena's contact 10 years ago? Damien said. He stayed standing. He kept his hands at his sides and his voice at its flattest register. Specifically. Lucian looked at him. Something in his expression shifted. Not guilt. Damien did not think Lucian was capable of producing guilt the way most people understood it, but something more like the specific discomfort of someone who has prepared for several possible conversations and is recalibrating for the one that's actually happening. I managed the situation, Lucian said. Say it specifically. You were being pulled into the organization. You were going to have to make choices about your future. Elena was a distraction, a significant one. You were 25 and you were making decisions based on your feelings for a woman when you needed to be making decisions based on the organization's survival. He said it without apology, with the particular flatness of someone laying out a business case. I intercepted 2 communications. I sent a message in her name telling you she was ending contact, and I told her through our father's office that you were unavailable. It took 2 conversations and 3 weeks and you moved forward. The organization stabilized. It was the correct call. The room was very quiet. The correct call, Damien said. You would have left, Lucian said. You were already starting to think about it. If you'd known she was pregnant, you would have walked away from everything our father had built, everything we'd fought for. You would have made a choice based on sentiment that would have destroyed the family's position in this city. I prevented that. You took my son from me, Damien said. I preserved the structure that protected all of us. For 7 years, you let me live 7 years not knowing, and you built something worth inheriting. Lucian's voice didn't rise. He made everything sound reasonable. That had always been his most dangerous quality. Damien, I am not your enemy. What I did 10 years ago was necessary, and what I'm doing now is equally necessary. You are not the same person you were. You have found Elena again. You have found the boy, and now you are making the same mistake you almost made a decade ago, letting sentiment override the organization's interests. Tell me what you want, Damien said. Step back from the leadership, Lucian said simply. Let me formalize what has been informally true for the past 3 years. I have been running the majority of operations while you have been the public face. Give me the title and the authority to match. Take Elena, take the child, build whatever life you want outside the organization. I have no interest in harming them. They become irrelevant the moment you step back. Damien looked at his brother across the table. He looked at the man who had dismantled a relationship and hidden a son and built a 7-year architecture of quiet control, and was now presenting it as a reasonable business proposal. He thought about the flash drive in his coat pocket with Sophia's documentation. He thought about Elena in the printing shop. He thought about Noah's stick figure drawing with the man and the boy holding flowers. No, he said. Lucian's composure stayed intact, but something behind his eyes went flat and cold in a way Damien recognized from their father. The look of someone shifting from negotiation to execution. Then we have a problem, Lucian said. We do, Damien said. But it's not the problem you think it is. He pulled out his phone. He turned the screen toward Lucian. On it was a text from Sophia, sent 30 seconds ago, containing a single line. Confirmation received. Package delivered to all listed recipients. Lucian looked at the screen. He looked at Damien. Something moved across his face that was the closest thing to genuine surprise Damien had seen from him. Everything on that drive, Damien said, went to 7 people in the past 20 minutes. Law enforcement, rival organizations, 2 journalists, and 3 members of the organization's inner council who have been waiting for a reason to move against you for 2 years. He put the phone back in his pocket. You built this very carefully, Lucian, but you built it around the assumption that I would find out too late. You miscalculated the timeline. Lucian said nothing. Where's Noah's photograph from? Damien said. The man in the schoolyard. Who is he? And Lucian, for the first time in the conversation, for perhaps the first time in their adult lives, did not have an immediate answer, which was when Damien understood that the photograph had not been left by Lucian's people. The man in the schoolyard was not one of Lucian's operatives. There was a third player, someone who had known about Noah even longer than Lucian, someone who had watched Lucian watching Elena, who had waited until Damien re-entered the picture to make their own move, and who had timed the warning text and the compromised safe house and the photograph not to help Damien, but to create maximum chaos between 2 brothers who were already in each other's crosshairs. Damien looked at Lucian. Lucian was looking at the phone, thinking. His composure had fractured in the specific way of someone who has realized their plan has been infiltrated by a variable they did not account for. "You don't know who he is either," Damien said. "No," Lucian said, and for the first time his voice carried something that sounded distantly like the beginning of fear. Outside the warehouse, a phone rang somewhere in the dark, then another. Then the sound of multiple vehicles arriving at the perimeter simultaneously, from directions that suggested coordination, and one of Lucian's outside men said something sharp and moved toward the door, and Damien looked at his brother across the table and understood that the situation they were both in had just become significantly larger than either of them had been managing. "We need to talk," Lucian said. "We do," Damien said, "and after that, I need to get to my son." The vehicles outside the warehouse were not police. Damien knew this within 30 seconds of the perimeter alarm. 3 of Lucian's men moved to the loading bay doors and came back reporting black SUVs, no plates, no markings, no loudspeaker commands. Police announced themselves. These vehicles simply stopped and waited, engines running, lights off, arranged in a pattern that covered all 4 exits with the geometrical precision of people who had studied the building's layout in advance. "How many?" Damien said to the man who'd come back from the loading bay. 6 vehicles. Could be 4 per car, 24 minimum." He looked at Lucian. Lucian was already on his phone, his composure partially restored, the negotiation face back in place over whatever was happening underneath it. He was calling someone and getting no answer, and cycling through contacts with the focused urgency of a man who is realizing his support structure has been compromised from a direction he didn't protect. "You're outside people," Damien said. "How many did you bring in?" 8, Lucian said, "but I can't reach the 4 on the east perimeter." 4 men gone silent in the past 5 minutes, which meant the vehicles outside had arrived with advance units already in place, which meant the preparation for this had begun significantly before the past 24 hours, which meant whoever had sent the photograph of Noah in the schoolyard had been moving toward this convergence for long enough that 6 vehicles and 24 professionals and a pre-placed 4-man perimeter team was not improvisation. This was an operation, timed and structured and executed against both of them simultaneously. "Who knew about this location?" Damien said. Lucian put the phone down. "My core people. 4 names. And how many of those 4 have been dark in the past hour?" Lucian's jaw moved. 3. Damien's phone buzzed. Unknown number. The 3rd unknown number in 2 days. He answered it. "Damien Ravel," said the voice, different from the earlier calls. Older, carrying the specific quality of someone who had been in rooms where decisions were made and had long since stopped needing to perform authority because it was simply present. "My name is Conrad Veth. I believe we have a mutual interest in having a conversation." "You have my attention," Damien said. "You're in the Ravel Southport warehouse with your brother. You have 4 functional people between you. I have considerably more outside. I'm not interested in a confrontation. That outcome benefits neither of us. I would like to meet." "What's your interest?" "The same as it's been for the past 6 years, Veth said. "The child." Damien's hand tightened on the phone. Across the table, Lucian was watching him with the focused attention of someone reading a conversation from one side. "Explain your interest in the child," Damien said. "Not over the phone. I'm outside the east entrance. Come alone. Or come with your brother. I don't care which, but the conversation needs to happen in the next 15 minutes before the situation develops in a direction that's inconvenient for everyone." A pause. "I have no interest in harming Elena Voss or the boy. My interest is in a conversation about the Ravel succession and what Noah represents to it. That's all." The line went quiet, not dead. Veth left it open, which was a negotiating posture, the posture of someone who expected a yes. Damien looked at Lucian. "Conrad Veth," he said. Lucian's face changed. "How does he know about—" He stopped. Something behind his eyes moved like pieces rearranging. "He's been watching me," Lucian said with a flatness that was partly assessment and partly something that in a different person would have been called wounded. "I put the surveillance on Elena 6 years ago, and he put surveillance on me." "Who is he?" "He was our father's lawyer for 20 years, Lucian said. "He managed the estate transition when our father died. He has access to documents about the organization's legal structure that nobody else has, holding company articles, contingency agreements, succession protocols built into the original corporate charters. He paused. If Noah's existence can be verified and documented as a Ravel heir, certain provisions in our father's estate structure would activate. Provisions that predate anything I put in place. Damien looked at his brother. What kind of provisions? The kind that would make a biological firstborn heir the primary successor to the consolidated Ravel holdings, Lucian said quietly. Not the operational organization, the legal structure underneath it, the property, the licensed businesses, the financial instruments, everything that exists in legitimate form. He looked at Damien with an expression that was the most honest thing he'd produced in 2 days. A 7-year-old boy with a verified birth certificate and a DNA match would own more of this city's infrastructure than either of us. Veth would be the administrator. He would control the heir until majority. The warehouse was very quiet. He's not after the organization, Damien said. He's after the legal estate. Which is worth considerably more, Lucian said, than the organization ever was. Damien put the phone back to his ear. 5 minutes, he told Veth. East entrance. He hung up. He looked at his 2 men. Stay here. He looked at Lucian. Come with me or don't. Your choice. Lucian came. What? Conrad Veth was 71 years old and looked like a man who had spent decades being underestimated because he resembled someone's grandfather. Compact, silver-haired, with the mild expression of someone who spent his days reviewing documents in a quiet office. He was standing outside the east entrance of the warehouse with 2 people flanking him who did not look like lawyers, and he extended his hand when Damien approached as if they were meeting at a business lunch. Damien did not take the hand. You photographed my son, Damien said. I documented the child's existence and location as a precautionary measure, Veth said, without missing a beat. The photograph was left in the safe house as a demonstration of access, not as a threat. It felt like a threat. I understand that. It wasn't intended as one. Veth's eyes moved briefly to Lucian. Lucian, you look well. You've been watching me for 6 years, Lucian said. I've been monitoring the situation since your father died. It's what he retained me to do. Veth returned his attention to Damien. Your father was not a sentimental man, but he was a thorough one. When he structured the estate, he included provisions for the possibility of undisclosed heirs. He had reason to believe they might exist, not specifically Elena Voss, but the general category. He asked me to monitor for developments. Lucian's surveillance of the woman led me to the child, and DNA analysis from materials accessible in the boy's school records confirmed the match 14 months ago. 14 months, Damien said. Yes. And you waited. I was watching to understand the full picture before acting. I wanted to know what Lucian intended and what you knew. Veth folded his hands. Mr. Ravel, I'm not your adversary. The estate provisions your father built give me a defined administrative role if a qualifying heir exists. I have a fiduciary and legal obligation to activate those provisions. I cannot ignore a verified heir simply because the timing is inconvenient. The child is 7, Damien said. He lives above a flower shop. He draws pictures of dogs. Whatever you're describing, he is not a piece in this. He became a piece in this the moment he was born, Veth said, with a gentleness that was somehow more disturbing than aggression would have been. I didn't create the provisions. I'm obligated to execute them. What do you actually want? Damien said. Specifically, tonight. I want your cooperation in the verification process. A voluntary DNA submission from you, a formal acknowledgement of Noah's parentage, and a meeting with Elena Voss to explain the estate implications. If those 3 things happen voluntarily and cleanly, the process moves through legal channels, and my people go home tonight. He paused. If they don't happen voluntarily, I have sufficient documentation to initiate a court proceeding that will be considerably less private and considerably more disruptive for everyone involved, including the child. Damien stood in the night air outside the warehouse and looked at this small, tidy man who had spent 6 years watching from a distance and had chosen tonight, the most destabilized night, the night when both Ravel brothers were cornered and off balance, to make his move. He thought about Elena in the printing shop. He thought about Noah's drawing. He thought about a 7-year-old boy becoming the center of a legal estate battle that would expose his existence to every person in this city who had a claim against the Ravel name. He thought, there is no version of tonight where this ends cleanly. Give me an hour, he said to Veth. You have 30 minutes, Veth said. after which my patience and my goodwill both expire." Damien turned and walked back toward the warehouse. Lucian fell into step beside him. "You're going to cooperate with him," Lucian said. "I'm going to get Elena and Noah out of this city before that man can get a court order," Damien said. "And then I'm going to deal with the estate question through my own lawyers at a time and pace of my choosing. He'll move the moment you—" "Lucian." He stopped walking. He turned and faced his brother in the dark between the warehouse wall and the line of silent vehicles. "I need something from you, one thing. After that, we're done. You and I can address what you did 10 years ago and everything since at whatever point you're ready to have that conversation. But right now, I need one thing." Lucian looked at him, the careful, assessing look. "What?" "Noah's school records, the ones Veth pulled DNA from. I need to know every location those records went through in the past 14 months. Every person who accessed them. Because if Veth's people had access, other people may have had access too. And I need to know how many people know that child exists before I can plan anything." Lucian was quiet for a moment. Then, "I can have it in 20 minutes. 15, Damien said. He pulled out the prepaid phone. He'd taken it from Elena before getting in the car, promised her he'd return it, hadn't yet. He typed a message to her contact in the printing shop. "Moving you now. Pack nothing. Go to the front of the building in 10 minutes. He sent it. He went back inside the warehouse and started making calls. Elena read the text twice. She looked at Noah, who had fallen asleep on a stack of paper-filled pallets with his coat folded under his head, and she thought about waking him and thought about the 14 hours he'd been in an elevated state of managed anxiety and thought about what it cost a 7-year-old to be that contained for that long. She woke him gently. He came awake the way he always did. Immediately, fully, eyes open and present before she'd finished saying his name. "We're moving," she said quietly. "Okay." He sat up, found his bakery bag, empty now, but he'd been carrying it all day, and she didn't ask, some things you just let children hold on to, put on his shoes, stood up. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safer." He looked at her. "Is my dad coming?" She picked up her phone and her keys and her coat and nothing else because there was nothing else to pick up. She had come here with nothing, and that was what she had. "I think so," she said. He nodded. He took her hand. They went to the front of the building. Damien was there in 8 minutes, not 10, which was either because the situation was more urgent than the text implied, or because he had pushed harder to get here than he'd planned. He came in a different car, not Marcus's, a gray sedan she didn't recognize with a driver who was not Breck. And he got out when he saw them and walked to them with a focused speed that was not quite running, but was the next closest thing. He looked at Noah first, then at Elena. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No," Elena said. "We're fine." He exhaled once, a short, controlled sound. He looked at Noah again. Noah was looking back at him with the careful eyes and the bakery bag and the shoe that had come slightly unlaced in the shuffle from the back room. "Your shoe's undone," Damien said. Noah looked down. "I know. I can't reach it right now." He held up Elena's hand, which was occupied. Damien crouched down on the sidewalk in front of his son and retied the shoe. His hands were not entirely steady. She could see it from where she stood, the slight imprecision. But he did it. He did it carefully, double-knotted, because she had shown Noah double-knotting 2 years ago, and apparently it was visible in how the lace was set. He stood back up. Noah looked at the shoe. "Thanks," he said. "Come on," Damien said, and put his hand on the car door. "Both of you." They drove north. Elena sat in the back with Noah, who was awake but quiet, looking out the window at the city moving past. Damien sat in the front and spent most of the drive on his phone, speaking in short sentences to people she couldn't identify, arranging things she could only partially track. She caught enough to understand that Lucian had provided the school records information and that the number of people who had accessed Noah's file was larger than Damien had hoped. 5 individuals beyond Veth's operation, none of them immediately identifiable, which was a problem that could not be resolved tonight and would have to be managed from a position of movement rather than stillness. After 40 minutes, the car stopped at a building she didn't recognize. Residential, older, a neighborhood she knew only by its general location in the north part of the city. The kind of area where buildings were solid and unremarkable, and people did not ask questions about their neighbors. "Whose place is this?" she said. Mine, Damien said, not registered to me, not connected to any Ravel entity. I bought it 7 years ago under a different name for exactly this kind of situation. He looked at her. Nobody knows about it. Not Lucian, not Marcus, not anyone in the organization. She looked at the building. She thought about a man who had spent 7 years maintaining a secret refuge that nobody knew about, against the day he might need one. She thought about the anonymous transfers, the hospital bill, the strangers who had stopped threats before they reached her that she had not known were threats. She thought about the specific, exhausting, apparently relentless way Damien Ravel had spent a decade protecting a family he didn't know he had. How long have you been doing this, she said, watching out for us? Since I found out Noah existed, he said. The file Marcus pulled that first night, I had started gathering that information the day after I came into the shop. But some of it I already had. Some of it I'd been gathering for years because I always... He stopped, started again. I never fully believed you'd walked away. I never stopped watching for you, not the way Lucian did, differently. I just needed to know you were okay. She looked at him. Outside the car, Noah had his nose to the window looking at the building with the evaluating expression he used on new environments. We can fight about all of that later, she said finally. Right now I need to get him inside and horizontal. Third floor, Damien said. The room on the right has a bed. There's food in the kitchen, nothing impressive, but enough. They went upstairs. Noah ate half a cheese sandwich and was asleep before 9 o'clock, in a room that smelled like clean linen and disuse. The bakery bag folded neatly on the bedside table beside him. Helena pulled the blanket up and stood over her son for a moment in the dark room and let herself feel, for the first time in 12 hours, the full accumulated weight of the day. Then she went back to the main room where Damien was standing at the window looking at the street below. Tell me the rest of it, she said. He told her about Veth, the estate provisions, the 14 months of verified knowledge about Noah, the 5 unknown individuals who had accessed the school records and whose identities were still outstanding. He told her with the directness and the completeness she had found herself demanding of him, that he was not editing it for comfort, and that she had decided she needed all of it regardless of how it felt to receive it. When he finished, she sat down on the couch and looked at her hands for a moment. So my son is an heir to a criminal estate, she said. The legal estate. The legitimate holdings. Damien, I know what you're saying. What are you going to do about Veth? Fight it. Legally. Through counsel, who are not connected to the Ravel organization. The provisions your father built into the estate were designed for a different kind of heir. An adult. Someone who could participate in the succession. Applying them to a minor is a different legal question, and I have people who can contest the mechanism. He paused. But it takes time. And while it's contested, Noah's existence is in the legal record. Public, potentially. She looked up. Can you stop that from happening? I don't know yet. She held his gaze. I need you to stop that from happening. I know. He said it without qualification. That's what I'm going to do. They sat in the quiet apartment for a moment. The city made its sounds below the window. Distant traffic, something mechanical 2 streets over. The ordinary sounds of a city that had no idea 3 people were sitting inside it at the center of a convergence that had been building for 10 years. Lucian, she said. What happens with Lucian now? Damien was quiet for a moment. The documentation Sophia sent out is in motion. It's going to cause him significant problems. The inner council members who received it will move against him operationally. He loses the infrastructure he's built inside the organization. He looked at the window. That's not enough. What he did 10 years ago and everything since, that's not something that's addressed by a corporate restructuring. No, she said, it isn't. I'm going to handle it, he said. I need you to be more specific than that. He looked at her. He won't be able to touch you or Noah again. That's what I can commit to tonight. The specific mechanism. I need to work that out. She studied him. She thought about how she'd spent 10 years parsing people for reliability. Which contractors delivered on time, which suppliers honored their quotes, which customers were actually going to come back. And she thought about the particular quality of certainty in Damien's voice, which was not the certainty of someone making a promise they wanted to be true, but the certainty of someone stating a fact about their own intentions that they had already made peace with. Okay, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Something shifted in his expression. Not relief exactly, something quieter than relief. The specific quality of a person who has not been believed in for a long time, receiving a small, conditional piece of trust. Then his phone rang. He looked at it, looked at her. "It's Veth," he said. His 30 minutes were up. He answered. He listened. She watched his face change. A series of small, contained changes, the processing of information in real time. And she knew from the quality of the changes that what Veth was saying was not what either of them expected. He lowered the phone. He looked at her with an expression she had not seen on him before. The specific look of someone who has just been told that the problem they were tracking is larger than the one in front of them. "Veth didn't send the text warning you about Marcus," he said. She went still. "He also didn't compromise the safe house," Damien said. "His people were watching the safe house, but they hadn't moved on it yet. Someone else hit it first." He paused. "And the photograph of Noah in the schoolyard, the man standing next to him. Veth's people just identified him." "Who is he?" Elena said. Damien looked at her. "His name is Ray Kellner. He worked for the Rovell organization for 11 years, until our father fired him 6 months before he died. He disappeared after the firing and nobody could locate him." A pause. "Veth says Kellner had access to the original estate documents. He would have known about the heir provisions before Lucian did, before anyone did. He's been running a parallel operation, not to claim the estate, not to control Noah. To use the child as leverage against both families simultaneously and sell the access to the highest bidder." The room felt smaller. "There's a fourth player," Elena said. "There was always a fourth player," Damien said. "We were just looking at the wrong board." He stood up. His voice went to the stripped register again, the one that came out when he was afraid and not showing it. "Veth just sent me Kellner's last known location. It's 40 minutes from here." He looked at the door to the room where Noah was sleeping. "Which means I need to leave, right now. And I need you to stay here with the door locked and not open it for anyone until I call you on this phone." Elena stood up. "Damien." "Elena." "Come back," she said. 2 words. She said them the way she'd said "be careful" earlier. Flat, immediate, entirely true. He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded. He picked up his coat. He went to the door and put his hand on the knob and then stopped. He turned back. He looked at Elena and at the door behind which his son was sleeping with a folded bakery bag on the bedside table. He looked at both of these things for a moment with the expression of someone deciding that certain things must be true before any of the rest of it can proceed. And then he opened the front door and went out into the dark hallway, and Elena heard his footsteps moving toward the stairwell, steady and deliberate, getting quieter, and then the sound of the door at the bottom of the stairs, and then nothing. She locked the front door. She went to the window. Below, the gray sedan pulled away from the curb and moved down the street and turned the corner and was gone. She went to the room where Noah was sleeping. She sat in the chair by the door and looked at her son in the dark and thought about a man whose name she had spent 10 years trying to make mean less than it did, going to find the last threat between his family and some version of safety, in a city that had been watching all 3 of them for longer than any of them knew. She sat there. She waited. The address Veth sent was a building Damien had driven past 100 times without registering, a disused hotel called the Caldmore, 8 stories, the kind of place that had been grand 60 years ago and had spent the decade since declining in increments too gradual to constitute an event. It sat on the western edge of Belarosa's old commercial district, sandwiched between a parking structure and a textile warehouse, its stone facade stained with years of rain and exhaust, its ground floor windows papered from inside. Damien arrived with Breck and 2 men from a contact list he had spent the drive north working through. People outside the formal Rovell structure, people Lucian had never had reason to build toward, people whose loyalty was owed to Damien personally rather than to the organization. It was a smaller team than the situation warranted, and he knew it. He went in anyway because the alternative was waiting, and he had run out of patience for waiting approximately 6 hours ago. The hotel lobby was dark and smelled like old carpet and standing water. The power was off in most of the building. Breck had a torch, Damien had his phone's light, and both of them moved through the ground floor with the particular controlled pace of people who understand that moving fast in the dark is how you get hurt. The two additional men held the entrance and the stairwell access on the east side. Damien found the first sign of occupation on the third floor, a generator running in what had been the hotel's back office, powering a work setup that told him Ray Kellner had been in this building for weeks. Folding table. Laptop. 3 prepaid phones in various states of charge. A wall of printed materials, photographs, documents, handwritten timelines, arranged with the meticulous focus of someone who had spent years in the dark preparing something they intended to be airtight. He stood in front of the wall and looked at it for 30 seconds. It was all there. Everything. A decade of documentation laid out in the obsessive detail of a man who had been building a case, not a legal case, a leverage case. Photographs of Elena's shop, school records, hospital documents from Noah's 4-night inpatient stay, DNA analysis results with a chain of custody that would hold up to serious scrutiny, communications between Lucian and his placed operatives, which meant Kellner had been inside Lucian's communications infrastructure for years, Veth's estate documents, the original succession provisions from the Ravel estate filing, annotated in Kellner's hand, and at the center of the wall, connected to everything else with red string in the methodical way of someone who needed their own architecture to stay coherent, a photograph of Damien and Elena, taken 10 years ago, in a restaurant he recognized as one they'd gone to early in the relationship. He didn't know who had taken it, he hadn't known it existed. Below that photograph, in handwriting he now recognized as Kellner's. Separation initiated by LR, confirmed via intercepted comm, archive ref 114. Archive reference 114. There was a physical file on the table below the wall labeled with numbers. He found 114. It was a printed transcript of a communication from 10 years ago, Lucian's voice, a call to one of the organization's internal message handlers, instructing them on the exact language to use when intercepting Damien's communications with Elena. Precise, detailed, timed to coincide with a period when Damien was managing a crisis in the organization's port operations and would have the least capacity to push back on unexpected personal news. Lucian had not improvised the separation. He had planned it. Down to the specific week, the specific communications window, the specific wording designed to make abandonment feel like the most plausible explanation to two people who were already under stress and physically apart. Damien stood with Archive 114 in his hand and let himself feel the full scope of it for a moment. 10 years, a son, a woman who had rebuilt her life from the wreckage of something manufactured. And then he put the document in his coat pocket and turned around. Ray Kellner was standing in the doorway. He was in his mid-50s, thinner than the schoolyard photograph had suggested, with the specific leanness of someone who had been operating under sustained stress for an extended period. He was holding a phone in his right hand and nothing in his left, and he looked at Damien with an expression that contained several things at once: wariness, calculation, and underneath both of those, the very specific look of a man who had been alone with his own plan for so long that the arrival of a real human consequence had caught him slightly off balance. "I was wondering when you'd come," Kellner said. He did not move from the doorway. "Step away from the door," Damien said. "I'm not armed." He moved sideways one step, enough to demonstrate the absence of aggression without conceding position entirely. "I want to talk." "So talk." Kellner looked at the wall, then at the file in Damien's hand. "You found 114. "Yes." "Then you know what Lucian did. All of it. Every mechanism." He kept his voice even. "I've had that for 4 years. I've had everything on that wall for varying lengths of time. I was your father's document manager for 11 years. I had access to things that nobody else had access to. And when he fired me, I took copies of everything because I understood that information was the only currency I'd have once I was outside the organization." He paused. "I didn't build this to hurt your son. I built it to survive." You were going to sell access to Noah's location," Damien said. "I was going to use the leverage to negotiate a settlement, a financial arrangement that would let me leave this city and not look back." His voice stayed level, but something in it shifted, thinner, the controlled quality wearing slightly. "I've been living in this building for 6 weeks, Damien. I've been eating from a cooler and sleeping on a folding cot because the moment I surface anywhere permanent, the people who want what I have will find me. I am not the threat to your son. I am a man who made a series of decisions about how to stay alive that I now understand were miscalculated. Breck was behind Damien and slightly to his left. The silence in the room had a particular texture, the texture of a moment waiting to resolve in one direction or another. The people you were going to sell the access to, Damien said. Who? There were 3 interested parties. One has been neutralized by the documents your contact distributed tonight. Lucian's operation is effectively finished, which removes one buyer and eliminates the most dangerous immediate threat to the boy. He paused. One is Veth, who you're already managing. The third is a man named Grigor Fane. He's not from Belarosa. He has a long-standing financial dispute with the Ravel estate that predates your father's death, and that the succession provisions, if activated via Noah, would resolve in his favor. He's been aware of Noah for approximately 8 months, sourced independently of me. Damien looked at him. How independently? He has a contact inside Belarosa General, someone in records. The hospital stay 6 years ago left a paper trail he found through a medical data broker. Kellner's expression shifted slightly, something that in a different context might have been close to regret. I'm telling you this because Fane is the one who hit the safe house tonight. Not Veth, not me. Is the variable that nobody has fully accounted for, and he is considerably less interested in negotiation than either Veth or I ever was. The generator hummed in the back office. Somewhere below them, the building settled with the sound of old structure adjusting to temperature. Where's Fane now? Damien said. Kellner looked at his phone. He turned the screen toward Damien. It showed a tracking interface, a single moving dot on a map of the city. The dot was in the North District. The dot was moving toward the address of the apartment building where Elena and Noah were waiting. Damien moved before the full sentence of what he was seeing had finished forming. I was at the door and past Kellner before Breck had processed the shift, and he was in the stairwell and taking the stairs at a pace that was not safe in the dark, but was the only pace available, and he was calling Elena's prepaid phone before he hit the ground floor, and it rang 4 times and went to nothing, no voicemail, because it was a prepaid with no setup. And he called again, and on the 3rd attempt she picked up. Someone is coming, he said, not stopping moving. Don't open the door. Wake Noah and go to the bathroom at the end of the hall. It has no exterior windows. Lock the door and don't open it until I call you back on this number. Damien, how long ago did you last hear anything in the building? A pause. There was something on the floor below maybe 10 minutes ago. I thought it was the building. It wasn't the building. Go. Right now. He heard her moving. He heard her voice, low and calm. The voice she used with Noah when she needed him to cooperate without panicking. Hey, come here. We're going to the bathroom for a minute. Come on. And then the sound of movement and a door, and then her voice back in the phone. We're in. Door's locked. Stay there, he said. I'm 20 minutes out, maybe less. Damien. Her voice had something in it he hadn't heard before. Not panic. Elena didn't produce panic the way most people did, but something adjacent, the particular thinness of someone at the end of their available composure. There's someone in the hallway. I can hear them. He was already at the car. I was already telling Breck to drive, and behind him Kellner had apparently made a decision because he came out of the hotel entrance and got in the back seat without being asked, and Breck looked at Damien, and Damien said drive, and they moved. Stay on the phone, Damien told Elena. Don't make noise. Don't respond to anything you hear outside that door unless it's my voice. Okay, she said. Very quiet. I'm coming, he said. Meant it the way he had never meant a logistical statement in his life. Boom. The drive took 17 minutes. Damien knew it took 17 minutes because he watched each one on the car's clock with the specific attention of someone who has run out of other things to control. Elena stayed on the phone. She didn't speak. There was nothing useful to say, and she understood that. But he could hear her breathing, and the sound of Noah's breathing slightly further away, and periodically the sound of something in the hallway outside the bathroom door that was not the building settling. At minute 11, Elena said very quietly, They're trying the door. It's a solid door, Damien said. How does the lock look? Old. Lever handle. Is there anything in the room you can brace against it? A pause. The sound of careful movement. There's a towel rail. It's mounted to the wall, but a small sound of effort. It came out. It's in my hand. Brace it under the handle. Angle it to the floor. That buys time. More careful movement. Then, done. Good. Keep Noah behind you. He's already there. A pause. He's not crying. Damien looked at the road ahead. He thought about a 7-year-old in a locked bathroom in the dark, behind his mother, not crying. He thought about the stubbornness in that child's jaw and where it came from, and something tightened in his chest that was not exactly pride, because the situation was too raw for something as clean as pride, but was made of similar material. Real. Tell him? He stopped, started again. Tell him I'm almost there. Elena relayed it. He heard Noah's voice, too low to make out words, and then Elena said, He says okay, and also the lace on his other shoe is loose. Damien almost said something. He didn't say it. He held the phone and looked at the road and willed the car to move faster through the last 3 streets. He was out of the car before it fully stopped. The building entrance was unlocked. That was wrong. It should have been locked. He had given Elena the key code for a reason. And he went up the stairs with Breck behind him and one of the other 2 men who had come from the hotel in his peripheral vision on the left. 3rd floor. The apartment door was open. Not forced. The lock was intact. The frame was undamaged. Someone had a key or had bypassed the lock in a way that left no visible trace, which was a specific skill set. He went in fast and low and cleared the main room in 4 seconds. Empty. The kitchen. Empty. The room where Noah had been sleeping. Empty. Bed rumpled. The bakery bag still on the bedside table. The hallway. A man he did not recognize was at the bathroom door. Mid-40s, compact, working the door with a tool and the patient efficiency of someone who did this professionally. He looked up when Damien came into the hallway and made a decision in approximately half a second. He went for a weapon at his hip, and Damien covered the distance between them in the time it took the weapon to clear the holster, and then it was physical, immediate. The brutal mathematics of 2 bodies in a narrow hallway with no room for anything elegant. Damien was not elegant. He was effective. The hallway was 4 feet wide, and the man from Bellarosa General's contact, Fane's operative, the variable nobody had fully accounted for, was good, but not good enough for a space this small against someone operating at this specific level of motivated fury. It lasted 40 seconds. The man went down. He stayed down. Damien stepped back and put one hand against the wall, because his ribs had taken something in the middle of it that would need attention later, and right now he could not afford to let the pain have the floor. Elena, he said. His voice came out rougher than intended. It's me. Open the door. Silence for 3 seconds that felt significantly longer. Then the sound of the towel rail being moved. The door opened. She was standing in the bathroom doorway with her hand on the frame and Noah directly behind her, his hand in hers. And she looked at Damien, and then at the man on the floor, and then back at Damien with an expression that moved through several things quickly. Relief, assessment, the specific look of someone who has been holding everything together through an act of sustained will and is now calculating whether it's safe to stop. She looked at his side. You're hurt. I'm fine. You're holding the wall. I'm fine, he said again. He looked at Noah. The boy was looking at the man on the floor with the careful, processing expression. Not frightened, assessing. Hey, Damien said to him. Noah looked up. You came back, he said. I said I would. Noah looked at him for a moment, then he looked at his shoe, the one with the loose lace. You said you'd fix the other one too, he said. Damien looked at the shoe. He looked at his son. He lowered himself carefully to one knee. His ribs protested with a specificity that suggested at least one was cracked, and he retied the second shoe. Double knot. His hands were less steady than they'd been the first time on the sidewalk outside the printing shop, but he got it done. He stood back up. He put one hand briefly on Noah's shoulder. Not a long gesture, not one that asked for anything, just a hand on the boy's shoulder for a moment. And Noah did not pull away. We need to move, Breck said from the main room. I know, Damien said. He looked at Elena. One more stop. What? Gregor Fane was arrested at Bellarosa's Eastern Rail Station at 11:40 that night, attempting to board a private charter with documentation that did not match the name on his ticketing. The arrest came through a combination of Damien's call to a law enforcement contact he had not used in 3 years and Kellner's testimony. delivered from the back seat of a gray sedan into a recording device that Breck produced from the glove compartment, with the particular exhausted cooperation of a man who has finally run out of alternatives to honesty. Kellner gave them everything. Fane's operation, his contacts inside Belarosa General, the 8-month timeline of his awareness of Noah, the financial dispute underlying his interest in the Ravel estate, the identities of the two individuals who had been feeding him access to the Ravel organization's secondary communications. He gave it all in the flat, detailed voice of someone who has been carrying a large thing for a long time and is simply relieved to put it down. In exchange, Damien made a single phone call that resulted in a conversation that resulted in Kellner being escorted, by morning, to a car that took him to a train that took him out of Belarosa with documentation that would hold up to the kind of scrutiny most people never applied to documentation. It was not justice in any formal sense. It was the kind of resolution available at 11:40 on a night when formal mechanisms were not the operational reality. Damien sat with the recording of Kellner's testimony in his pocket and thought about what it meant to possess absolute proof of what his brother had done and what he intended to do with it. He called Lucian at midnight. Lucian answered. He had spent the past 4 hours dealing with the consequences of Sophia's distributed documentation. Damien could hear it in his voice. The specific quality of a man managing multiple simultaneous fires, the composure present but costing more than usual. It's over, Damien said. Silence. You have a choice, Damien said. I have the Kellner recording, Archive 114 and everything connected to it. Complete documentation of what you did 10 years ago and everything built on top of it. He kept his voice level. You can choose to dispute it. Go through the organization, the council, whatever mechanism you want to use. I have the material to destroy you in any venue you choose. A pause. Or you can step back. Completely. Leave the organization, leave Belarosa, and build whatever life you can somewhere else. No formal action. No exposure to the people you've spent a decade negotiating with. You walk away intact. The silence lasted long enough that Damien checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. And Elena, Lucian said finally, the boy. They're not part of this negotiation, Damien said. They're outside it permanently. That's not a condition, that's a fact. Another silence, shorter this time. The legal holdings, Lucian said. Veth and the estate provisions, I'll handle Veth. The estate question is between me and a lawyer and a legal process that has nothing to do with you anymore. He paused. Lucian, I need an answer. He heard his brother breathe in once, slowly. He heard the specific quality of a man in his mid-30s confronting the complete collapse of an architecture he had spent years constructing and finding at the far end of that confrontation, that the person holding the wreckage in front of him is still offering an exit rather than a reckoning. I'll be out of the city by Thursday, Lucian said. Good, Damien said. He ended the call. He sat in the car with the city outside the window and the recording in his pocket and the particular hollowness that comes after sustained crisis, when the crisis has resolved and the body hasn't yet received the signal that it's permitted to stop operating at emergency capacity. He thought about whether he had made the right call with Lucian. He thought about it seriously, without flinching from the parts that were uncomfortable, that Lucian had taken 10 years from him, had taken a son from him, had manufactured a wound he had carried without understanding where it came from. He thought about what it meant to choose exit over reckoning for a person who had done all of that. And he thought about the difference between mercy and practicality and whether the choice he'd made was either or both or neither. He did not arrive at a clean answer. He suspected there wasn't one, and that the absence of a clean answer was simply the texture of decisions made in real conditions by people who were not in a position to wait for clarity. He put the phone in his pocket and went back inside. Elena was in the kitchen of the apartment when he came back upstairs. Noah was asleep again. She had gotten him back into the room, back into the bed, with the reliable efficiency of a woman who had been putting a child to sleep under difficult circumstances for 7 years. She was at the kitchen table with a glass of water and her hands flat on the table, and the particular stillness of someone who has been moving fast for a long time and has only just stopped. Damien came in. He sat down across from her. She looked at his side. How bad is it? Probably 1 rib, maybe 2. He had taped it in the bathroom 20 minutes ago with the first aid kit from under the sink, which was a temporary solution that would need to become a medical one by morning. I've had worse. That's not reassuring. I know. She looked at him. The kitchen light was low. One of the two overhead bulbs was out and neither of them had addressed it. And in the partial light she looked, for the first time since Saturday morning, like someone who was allowed to be tired. The controlled competence was still present, but it was resting on something more visible now. The actual person underneath it, who had held an enormous amount together for an enormous amount of time. "Lucian," she said, "he'll be out of the city by Thursday." "That's all?" "That's what I chose." She looked at her hands. She turned the glass of water a quarter turn, a small, thinking gesture. "Is that enough?" He considered the question honestly. "I don't know," he said. "I know it's what I could do tonight. Whether it's enough depends on what we mean by enough. And I'm not sure I have a definition for that yet." She nodded. She turned the glass back. "Archive 114, he said. He took the folded document from his pocket and set it on the table between them. The Intercept transcript. What Lucian did specifically, 10 years ago. I want you to have it. Not because I need you to do anything with it, because you deserve to know that the thing you believed for 10 years, that I chose to leave, that I chose not to find you, wasn't the truth. It was manufactured. And you should have proof of that rather than just my word." She looked at the document. She did not pick it up immediately. She looked at it the way you look at something you've been waiting for long enough that the arrival of it requires a moment of adjustment. Then she picked it up. She read it. She took a long time reading it, longer than the length of the document required, which told him she was reading it more than once, the way you read something when you need to locate it in 10 years of history and find the places where it changes what you understood. She set it down. She looked at the table. "I spent 4 years being angry at you," she said, "and then I spent 6 years being done with being angry, getting past it." She kept her eyes on the table. "And now I find out there was nothing to be angry at you about in the first place. Elena, I'm not saying that as an accusation. I'm saying it because I need to say it out loud to understand what it means." She looked up. Her eyes were clear, not wet. She was holding the emotion with the same practiced containment she held everything, but he could see the effort of it. "It means I wasted a lot of time and energy managing a grief that was built on a lie." "I know. And Noah grew up without a father because of a lie." "I know that too." She held his eyes. "I don't know yet what to do with all of that," she said. "I don't know how to reprocess 10 years of a decision I made for what I thought were real reasons, now that the reasons weren't real. I need time for that." A pause. "But I want you to know that I believe you. I believe you didn't choose to leave. I believed it before I read that document, actually. I believed it sometime in the past 4 days, looking at you with him, watching how you—" She stopped. "I believed it before I had proof. The proof is just, it's something to hold." He didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that the moment could hold without breaking something in it, and he had learned recently that some moments should not be filled. She stood up. She picked up the document and folded it carefully and put it in the pocket of her jacket. She took her glass to the sink. She stood at the sink for a moment with her back to him, looking at the window above it, which showed nothing but the faint light of the city through the dark. "What happens with Veth?" she said. "The estate." "I have a meeting with my own lawyers on Monday. The provisions your father built are real, but the mechanism for applying them to a minor is legally contested ground. It will take time. Noah's existence may become part of a legal record, but I intend to manage how that happens and with what protections around it." He paused. "I will not let him be exposed to this the way tonight exposed him. Whatever the estate process looks like, it goes through channels I control, at a pace that lets him stay a 7-year-old. She turned around. She leaned against the sink with her arms crossed, not defensively, a resting posture, and looked at him across the kitchen. "He asked me again," she said. "In the bathroom, while we were waiting. He asked if you were going to be around." Damien looked at her. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that was your answer to give." He stood up from the table. His ribs reminded him immediately, and with specificity, that he had done something inadvisable to them, and he moved carefully to the counter and stood across the kitchen from her with the low light between them. "I want to be around," he said. "I want to be in his life, and I want to be in yours, in whatever shape makes sense, and I understand that both of those things require time and patience, and your willingness to find out whether I'm capable of being a different person than the one who existed in that world." He held her eyes. "I don't have a record to point to. I can only tell you what I intend and then be what I intend. That's all anyone can do, she said. I know. I just want you to know I understand it's not enough on its own. She looked at him for a moment, then she uncrossed her arms and pushed off the sink. Go to sleep, she said. You have a cracked rib, and you've been running on nothing since this morning. The couch has a blanket. She was past him and into the hallway before he found the appropriate response, and then she paused at the door to the room where Noah was sleeping and looked back at him once. A look that was not forgiving yet, was not promising yet, but was looking, and meant to keep looking, and that was the thing he'd earned tonight and the thing he intended to deserve. She went into the room. The door stayed slightly open. He found the blanket on the couch. He lay down. He looked at the ceiling of a room in an apartment that nobody knew he had, in a city that had watched all three of them for longer than any of them understood, and he thought about how the things that define a life are rarely the large dramatic events, but the accumulated small choices that either add up to something or don't. He thought about a folded bakery bag on a bedside table. He thought about double-knotted shoelaces. He closed his eyes. For the first time in 4 days, he slept. Thursday came and went, and Lucian was gone. He left no word, no forwarding information, no final communication of any kind. His absence from the organization produced its own restructuring in the way that power vacuums always do. Quickly, imperfectly, with the specific chaos of institutions that have depended too long on a single center. Damien managed it from a distance, through the council members Sophia had briefed, and 2 additional people who had been waiting for exactly this realignment. He was present where he needed to be present and absent from the rest of it, and the distinction between the two was something he had never previously made with this kind of intention. Veth's estate proceeding moved into a legal process managed by 4 lawyers whose combined skill set Damien had assembled over the course of a week of calls. The proceeding was going to take time, months, probably longer, and the outcome was uncertain in the way that legal outcomes always are when the question is genuinely novel. What was not uncertain? Noah was represented in that process by counsel who answered to Elena, and any exposure of his identity to the broader record would happen on a controlled timeline and with protections built around it. This was not everything. It was enough for now. The man Damien had found at the bathroom door spent 10 days in a private medical facility, not Bella Rosa General, a smaller place outside the city, recovering from a wrist fracture and 2 broken fingers that had resulted from the hallway confrontation. He was then interviewed by a law enforcement contact who had been asking Damien for cooperation on Fane's operation for 2 years and was satisfied to receive it now in the shape it was available. He would not be a problem for Elena or Noah. Neither would Fane, who was in formal custody, his charter plane and its undocumented passengers providing enough material for a proceeding that would keep him occupied for years. Kellner sent a postcard from a city Damien did not recognize 6 weeks after his departure. No return address. On the back, in the same small handwriting as the annotations on the wall, Archive 114 copies submitted to a journalist for sealed escrow. Insurance, no hard feelings. He was right that it wasn't hard feelings. It was just someone keeping a safety valve, which Damien would have done in the same position and found easy enough to respect. The flower shop reopened on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after it had been closed. Elena had called it a temporary closure for renovations, which was not entirely false. She had used the time to replace the broken display case and repaint the back room and fix a persistent leak in the rear window seal that she'd been meaning to address for 2 years. The work was something to do with her hands during a period when her hands needed something to do. Noah went back to school. He came home on the first day with a drawing he'd done in art class, which he presented to Elena without comment and which she tacked to the corkboard in the back room. A flower shop with 3 stick figures outside, 2 adults and a smaller one, all holding something that might have been flowers or might have been flags. It was hard to tell, and the smaller figure had a shoe detail that she recognized as Noah's attempt to draw a shoelace. Damien came by on Saturday mornings. This had begun as an arrangement, specific time, specific duration, the shape of a formal custody agreement before any formal custody agreement existed, and had gradually become something less formal and more actual, the way things become actual when they are practiced consistently by people who mean them. He brought coffee for Elena, the specific order from a place 2 blocks away that he had established on the second Saturday and maintained on every subsequent one. He brought nothing for Noah because Noah had told him on the third Saturday that he didn't actually like the pastries from the bakery near the old apartment and preferred the ones from a different place entirely. And Damien had taken the information without visible injury and had arrived the following Saturday with pastries from the correct place, and had been arriving with the correct pastries ever since. Noah taught him, over the course of several Saturdays, how to help with the flower arrangements. He was not good at it. His proportions were wrong, and he had no instinct for color placement, and Elena had to redo 3 of the arrangements he worked on before they were sellable. He kept coming. He got marginally better. By the 6th Saturday, he could wrap a bundle of mixed stems without her needing to unwrap it, which was not a high bar, but was a real one. One morning, mid-October, the light through the front window was the particular amber of early fall, and Elena was at the work table and Noah was helping Damien with an arrangement near the display case. Noah directing, Damien executing, with the specific dynamic of a child who has identified a competency gap and has appointed himself the corrective authority. And Elena looked over at them and looked away again and kept working. She did not analyze the moment while it was happening. She let it be what it was. Later, after Damien had left and Noah was in the back room doing homework, Elena took Archive 114 from the pocket of her good jacket, where she had been carrying it since the night he gave it to her. She looked at it for a long time. Then she put it in the fireproof box under her desk, the one where she kept the shop deed and Noah's birth certificate and the photograph from the hospital, 4 days old, that she had never shown anyone. She locked the box. She put it back under the desk. She went to the front of the shop and turned the closed sign to open and stood in the doorway for a moment in the October light, the smell of the flowers behind her and the street in front of her and the sound of Noah's voice from the back room, reading something aloud to himself in the unself-conscious way he had when he thought no one was listening. The city moved. People passed on the sidewalk. A couple stopped to look at the display in the front window, pointed at something, moved on. She stood there a moment longer than she needed to. Then she went back inside and got back to work.